Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. James Royce stood at his kitchen counter, watching steam rise from his coffee mug. The morning light cut through the windows of his Buckhead home, casting sharp angles across the granite surface. Everything looked perfect from the outside, just like his marriage was supposed to. "You're up early." Amelia's voice carried that familiar edge as she walked into the kitchen. Her silk robe hung loose around her shoulders, dark hair still messy from sleep. Project meeting at 8. James didn't look up from his phone, scrolling through work emails. His construction company had 3 builds running simultaneously, and every detail demanded his attention. Of course. She poured herself coffee, movements sharp and deliberate. "When's the last time we had breakfast together?" "Tuesday." "That was 3 weeks ago, James." He looked up then, studying her face. The woman he'd married 8 years ago still turned heads everywhere she went, but something had shifted behind those green eyes. Something cold had settled there. "We could have breakfast now," he said. "I have a client call in 20 minutes. She grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl. Fashion PR doesn't wait. James nodded and returned to his phone. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. "James!" Her voice softened, but it felt forced. "The Hendersons are having people over Saturday. We should go. I'll check my schedule." "You always check your schedule." The edge returned. "Maybe just say yes for once." He set down his phone and looked at her directly. "When have I ever said no to something you wanted?" She stared back for a moment, then shook her head. "Forget it." The front door slammed minutes later, leaving James alone with his coffee and the echo of her heels on marble. He pulled up his calendar. Saturday was open, but something in his gut told him that the Henderson party wasn't about socializing. His phone buzzed. A text from his cousin Joss. "Drinks tonight? You sound like you need them." James hadn't realized he sounded like anything over text, but Joss had always been able to read between the lines. He typed back, "Your place." 8. That the rest of the day blurred past in meetings and site visits. James threw himself into work the way he always did when home felt like standing on shifting ground. His partner, Rick, noticed him staying late again. "Everything good at home?" Rick asked as they reviewed blueprints for their latest project. "Fine." James made a note about the kitchen layout. "Amelia's busy with her own work." "Right." Rick didn't push, but his expression said enough that by 7:30, James was driving through downtown Atlanta toward Joss's bar. The Brass Monkey sat tucked between a vintage clothing store and a tattoo parlor on Ponce de Leon. Nothing fancy, just good whiskey and better conversation. Joss had already poured 2 glasses of bourbon when James walked in. The bar was quiet for a Thursday, night of few regulars at the far end, jazz playing low from the speakers. "You look like someone kicked your dog," Joss said, sliding the glass across the bar. James took a sip and felt the burn. No dog to kick. "But there's something." Joss leaned against the bar, dark eyes sharp with concern. At 36, she'd inherited their family's ability to cut through bullshit. "Talk." "Amelia's been different." "Different how?" James turned the glass in his hands. "Distant. Cold. Like she's somewhere else, even when she's right there." "How long?" "Couple months. Maybe longer." He took another sip. "She stays out late. Always has some event or client dinner. Never wants to talk about her day." Joss was quiet for a moment. "You think she's cheating?" The word hung in the air between them. James had been thinking it for weeks, but hadn't let himself say it. "I don't know, but you suspect." "Yeah." Joss refilled his glass. "What are you going to do about it?" "Nothing yet." James met her eyes. "I'm not chasing shadows. If something's happening, I'll know soon enough." "James!" Joss's voice went gentle. "You know, Amelia never liked being married to someone so controlled. She needs attention, validation. Always has. She has my attention. No, she has your presence. There's a difference." Joss topped off her own drink. "You keep everything locked up inside. Some women find that mysterious. Others find it frustrating." James had heard this before. In their marriage counseling sessions 2 years ago, Amelia had said the same thing. He was too contained, too emotionally disciplined. She felt like she was married to a wall. "I don't know how to be different," he'd told the counselor. "You shouldn't have to be," Joss said now, reading his thoughts. But Amelia's the type who needs the world to tell her she's special. If she's not getting that at home, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Meanwhile, across town in a motel room off I-285, Amelia pressed her face against Kellen Bishop's chest. The room smelled like cheap cologne and cigarettes. Nothing like the carefully curated scents of her Buckhead home. "He knows," she whispered. Kellen ran his fingers through her hair. "How can you tell?" "The way he looks at me. Like he's waiting for something. Maybe it's time to stop waiting." Kellen's voice carried that smooth confidence that had drawn her to him 3 months ago. "Make a move." Amelia pulled back to look at him. Kellen was everything James wasn't: spontaneous, passionate, uncontrolled. His dark hair fell across his forehead, and those brown eyes promised adventure James never could. "I can't just leave." "Why not?" His hand traced down her spine. "You said yourself he's like living with a robot. All work, no passion. It's complicated." "No, it's not." Kellen sat up, reaching for his cigarettes. "You're scared. Scared of being alone. Scared of starting over." "I'm not scared." "Then prove it." He lit the cigarette, exhaled smoke toward the ceiling. "Stop playing house with someone who doesn't even see you." Amelia stared at the water stain above the bed. The motel room felt both sordid and thrilling, everything her marriage wasn't. But walking away from 8 years from the house, from the life they'd built, "I need time." "Time for what?" "For him to figure out and leave you with nothing." Kellen's voice hardened. "I'm not going to be your secret forever, Amelia." She kissed him to stop the conversation, but his words echoed in her head long after she returned home to find James asleep in his study. Blueprints spread across his desk. The white space gallery buzzed with conversation and clinking glasses. Amelia had outdone herself. The space looked elegant, modern art covering the walls, servers moving through the crowd with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Everyone who mattered in Atlanta's creative scene had come to celebrate 10 years of love and creativity. James stood near the bar, nursing a whiskey and watching his wife work the room. She looked stunning in a black dress that hugged her curves, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, touching arms and cheeks like she was running for office. "Nice party," Rick said, appearing beside him with a beer. Amelia's idea. Celebrating what exactly? James had wondered the same thing. When Amelia announced the party 2 weeks ago, she'd been vague about the details. Something about marking a decade of marriage and creative partnership, though James couldn't remember to the last time she'd shown interest in his construction work. 10 years of marriage, James said. "Right." Rick scanned the crowd. "A lot of people I don't recognize." James had noticed that too. Most of the guests were from Amelia's world: fashion people, artists, social media types. A few of their mutual friends had shown up, but the crowd skewed heavily toward Amelia's contacts. "James!" Amelia appeared at his elbow, slightly breathless from mingling. "There's someone I want you to meet." She led him across the room toward a man with shoulder-length hair and a carefully sculpted beard. He wore a vintage band t-shirt under a blazer, the kind of calculated casual that cost more than it looked. "James, this is Kellen Bishop. He's been helping me with some creative projects." Kellen extended his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Great to finally meet you, man. Amelia talks about you all the time." The handshake lasted a beat too long. James studied Kellen's face, noting the way his eyes flicked between them, the slight tension in his jaw. "What kind of creative projects?" James asked. "Oh, you know." Kellen's laugh felt forced. "Music curation, event planning, bringing art and commerce together." "Kellen's a DJ," Amelia added quickly. "Very talented, I'm sure." James kept his voice neutral, but something cold settled in his chest. The way Amelia looked at Kellen, the way she stood just slightly closer to him than necessary, it painted a picture James had been trying not to see. "I should get back to the other guests," Amelia said. "You two get acquainted." She disappeared into the crowd, leaving James and Kellen facing each other. The silence stretched uncomfortable. "So," Kellen said, "construction, right? Must be rewarding, building things that last." "It is. I'm more about the moment, you know? Creating experiences, making people feel something right now." Kellen's smile turned sharp. "Different approaches to life. Different approaches to everything, I imagine." Kellen's expression shifted, like he was trying to figure out how much James knew. Amelia says you work a lot. I work enough. Must be hard on her. All those lonely evenings. The comment hit like a slap, but James kept his face blank. Amelia's never mentioned being lonely. Maybe she doesn't feel comfortable talking to you about certain things. The accusation hung in the air between them. James felt his hands clench at his sides, but his voice stayed level. What exactly are you trying to say? Nothing, man. Just making conversation. But Kellen's eyes were bright with malice now. Though I will say, if I had a woman like that at home, I'd make sure she felt appreciated. James stepped closer, close enough to smell the whiskey on Kellen's breath. Be very careful what you say next. Or what? Kellen's laugh was ugly now, loud enough to draw glances from nearby guests. You'll what exactly? James. Amelia reappeared, her face flushed with panic. What's going on? Your friend here was just giving me marriage advice, James said, not breaking eye contact with Kellen. I was just saying. Kellen started. Don't. James's voice cut through whatever Kellen was about to say. We're done talking. He turned to walk away, but Kellen's voice followed him. Running away? That's probably the problem right there. James stopped. The gallery went quiet around them, conversations faltering as people sensed the tension. Kellen, stop. Amelia hissed, but Kellen was drunk now, drunk on whiskey and whatever game he thought he was playing. No wonder she needs someone who actually gives a damn. James turned around slowly. The room held its breath. Say that again. You heard me. Kellen puffed out his chest. Maybe if you were man enough to keep your wife interested, she wouldn't need to look elsewhere. The words hit like physical blows, confirming everything James had suspected. But instead of exploding, something cold and calculating settled over him. He walked back toward Kellen with deliberate steps. You're right, James said quietly. I should have paid more attention. Kellen blinked, confused by the calm response. I should have noticed the late nights, the new clothes, the way she started doing her hair different. James's voice never rose above conversational level, but it carried through the silent gallery. I should have asked more questions about her creative projects. James, Amelia whispered. I should have wondered why my wife suddenly needed to celebrate 10 years of love and creativity with a room full of strangers. James looked directly at Amelia now, but I didn't want to see it. I thought if I gave you space, you'd figure out what you wanted. Amelia's face went white. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. James turned back to Kellen. The question is, what kind of man brags about it to the husband's face? Kellen's confidence cracked. Look, man, I didn't mean... Yes, you did. James stepped closer. You meant every word. You wanted me to know. You wanted this moment. The gallery was dead silent now. Everyone watching the confrontation unfold. Well, you got it, James continued. Congratulations. You won. Kellen's face flushed red. Don't try to make me the bad guy here. You ignored your wife. You pushed her away with your cold shoulder bullshit. Maybe I did. You did. Kellen was getting loud again, emboldened by what he took for weakness. She needed someone who could actually feel something. Someone who wasn't afraid to show emotion. You're right again. Kellen blinked, thrown off by the continued calm. I am cold, James said. I do keep my emotions locked up. I probably am hard to live with. He paused, letting the words sink in. But I never lied to her. I never snuck around behind her back. And I sure as hell never disrespected someone's marriage at their own anniversary party. This isn't about respect. Everything's about respect. James's voice dropped even lower, forcing people to strain to hear. But you wouldn't know that. You don't respect my wife, or you wouldn't treat her like a secret. You don't respect yourself, or you wouldn't be satisfied with scraps. And you sure don't respect me, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. Kellen's face was red now, whether from drink or anger or embarrassment. You think you're better than me? I think I'm different than you. Yeah? Well, different doesn't seem to be working out too well. We'll see. Something in James's tone made Kellen take a step back. But he was too drunk, too committed to the scene he'd created. You want to know the truth? Kellen's voice rose again. She comes to me because you're nothing. A boring, cold nothing. She tells me how you just sit there, working your little projects, never talking, never feeling anything real. Kellen, stop. Amelia pleaded. No, he needs to hear this. Kellen pointed at James. You think because you make money and drive a nice car that makes you a man? You're a coward. Too scared to fight for what's yours. James nodded slowly. You might be right about that too. I know I'm right. But here's what you got wrong. James looked Kellen in the eye. You think I'm not fighting because I'm afraid. But I'm not fighting because I already won. What the hell does that mean? It means you can have her. James's smile was cold as winter. Enjoy the prize. He turned to walk away, but Kellen wasn't done. The alcohol and humiliation and audience demanded a bigger ending. That's right, walk away, Kellen shouted. Just like always. James kept walking. Coward. James stopped at the gallery door and looked back one last time. Kellen stood in the center of the silent crowd, fists clenched, face red with fury. Amelia stared at James with wide eyes, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. You're right, James said calmly. I'm a coward. Too cowardly to stay married to someone who doesn't want to be married to me. He pushed through the door and stepped out into the Atlanta night. Behind him, he heard Kellen shouting something else, heard Amelia's voice try to calm him down. But James was already walking toward his car, his mind working through the practical details of what came next. He'd made it 3 steps when he heard the gallery door slam open behind him. James! He turned to see Kellen stumbling out, face twisted with rage. We're not done talking. Yes, we are. No, we're not. Kellen came closer, weaving slightly. You think you can just walk away after embarrassing me in there? I think I can do whatever I want. Bullshit. Kellen was close enough now that James could smell the whiskey and desperation on him. You think you're so much better than everyone else. So controlled, so smart. I think I'm going home. To what? Empty house, cold bed. Kellen's laugh was ugly. At least I know what it's like to make her scream. The words hung in the air between them. James felt something dark and dangerous uncurl in his chest, but his face remained calm. Are you finished? I'm just getting started. Kellen swayed on his feet. You want to know what she says about you? How she wishes you were dead. How she fantasizes about the insurance money. James took a step closer. Last chance to walk away. Or what? You'll call the police. Kellen's voice dripped contempt. File a complaint? Sue me? No. Then what? James smiled, and something in that smile made Kellen take a step back. I'll remember everything you just said. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across Kellen's face, but the alcohol and anger pushed him forward. Remember this. Kellen grabbed an empty whiskey bottle from the gallery's outdoor trash can and swung it at James's head. The glass shattered against his skull above his left ear, sending him stumbling sideways. Blood ran down his face, dripping onto his white shirt. The gallery door burst open as people rushed outside, drawn by the sound of breaking glass. Amelia screamed. Someone shouted for someone to call 911. James stood there for a moment, blood streaming down his face, staring at Kellen. The silence stretched long enough for everyone to understand what had just happened. That was your last mistake, James said quietly. Then he walked to his car, ignoring the shouts behind him, ignoring Amelia calling his name, ignoring the blood in his eyes. He drove himself to the hospital while his wife stayed at the gallery with her lover. And somewhere between the ER and the police report, James Royce decided to take everything. The emergency room lights were too bright, turning everything harsh and clinical. James sat on the examination table while Dr. Martinez cleaned the cut on his scalp. You're lucky, the doctor said, threading the needle for stitches. Few inches lower, and this could have caught your eye. James didn't feel lucky. He felt focused in a way he hadn't in months, maybe years. The attack had burned away all the uncertainty, all the second-guessing. Now he knew exactly where he stood. How many stitches? He asked. 12. Dr. Martinez worked carefully, her hands steady. The scarring should be minimal, especially if you keep it clean. I don't mind scars. The police officer, Detective Ray Collins, looked up from his notepad. He was a thick-set man in his 50s with tired eyes that had seen too much. You want to tell me again what happened? James recounted the evening's events in precise detail. The party, the confrontation, Kellen's admission about the affair, the attack with the bottle. His voice never wavered, never showed emotion. Just facts. Any witnesses? About 50 people saw him hit me with a bottle. And before that, the argument. Same 50 people. Detective Collins made notes. Your wife's still at the scene? As far as I know. She didn't come with you to the hospital? James met the detective's eyes. No. Collins nodded like that told him everything he needed to know. We'll file charges for assault with a deadly weapon. The bottle counts as a weapon under Georgia law. Good. You plan to pursue this in civil court too? Yes. Smart. Collins closed his notepad. Guy like that, he's got a record. This won't be his first rodeo. After the police left and the doctor finished, James sat alone in the examination room, feeling the pull of the stitches in his scalp. His phone had been buzzing with texts and calls, but he ignored them all. Instead, he called Joss. Jesus Christ, James. Are you okay? I'm fine. Can you pick me up at Piedmont Hospital? What happened? I'll tell you when you get here. 20 minutes later, Joss found him in the parking lot, dried blood still staining his shirt despite the doctor's cleanup efforts. Holy shit. She stopped short when she saw him. Who did this? Kellen Bishop, Amelia's boyfriend. He hit you with what? Whiskey bottle. Joss drove them back to her bar in silence, processing the information. The streets were empty now, past midnight, the city settling into its late-night rhythm. Where's Amelia? She finally asked. Still at the gallery, I assume. She didn't come to the hospital. No. Jesus. They pulled into the alley behind the Brass Monkey. Joss had James sit at the bar while she poured 2 large whiskeys. Okay, she said. Tell me everything. James recounted the evening from start to finish. Amelia's strange behavior, the party setup, meeting Kellen, the confrontation, the admission about the affair, the attack. Joss listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each detail. So she's been cheating for months. At least. And this asshole attacked you in front of 50 witnesses. More or less. Joss was quiet for a moment, turning her glass in her hands. What are you going to do? James looked up from his whiskey, and when he spoke, his voice carried a quiet certainty that made Joss shiver. I'm taking everything. James spent the next morning in his home office, surrounded by legal documents and financial records. The house felt different with Amelia gone lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from the air itself that she'd come home around 3 a.m. He'd heard her moving around downstairs, but she hadn't come up to the bedroom. When he woke at 6, she was gone again, probably staying with friends or back at whatever hotel she and Kellen used for their meetings. His laptop screen showed the results of 4 hours of research. Kellen Bishop wasn't hard to investigate. He lived his life on social media, posted photos of his DJ gigs, tagged himself at restaurants and clubs. But the real information came from public records. James made notes as he read. Arrested for assault and battery in 2019. Served 18 months, 3 civil judgments for unpaid debts totaling $47,000. Evicted from 2 apartments in the last 5 years and owes significant assets in his name. But the interesting part was what Kellen did own. The lease on his Midtown apartment was in Amelia's name. The registration for his BMW was in Amelia's name. Even his DJ equipment, according to the insurance policy James found, was covered under Amelia's renter's insurance. James sat back in his chair, processing the implications. Amelia had been financing Kellen's entire lifestyle, probably for months. Money that came from their joint accounts, from the business they'd built together. His phone rang. Rick's name on the caller ID. How are you feeling? Rick asked. Fine. 12 stitches, but nothing serious. Jesus. I heard what happened. Everyone's talking about it. James wasn't surprised. The Atlanta creative scene was small and incestuous. Word would spread fast. What are they saying? That your wife's been cheating with some DJ and he attacked you at the party. Rick paused. Is it true? Yes. Damn, brother. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm better off knowing. What can I do? James looked at the documents spread across his desk. I need you to run all the background checks we do for new hires. On Kellen Bishop and anyone connected to him. Personal or professional. Both. Criminal, financial, employment history. Everything. Done. Anything else? Yeah. I need to review our corporate structure. Partnership agreements, asset allocation, everything. Rick was quiet for a moment. You thinking about the divorce? I'm thinking about protecting what we built. After hanging up, James opened another browser window and began researching property law. The house they live in had been purchased before their marriage with funds from his company's trust. It had never been retitled in both their names, something Amelia had mentioned wanting to do several times. But James had always been too busy to deal with the paperwork. Now he was grateful for his procrastination. His phone buzzed with a text from Amelia. "We need to talk." He deleted it without responding. Another text. "I know you're angry, but this doesn't have to get ugly." Delete. "James, please. I made mistakes, but we can fix this." Delete. His email chimed. A new message from Amelia with the subject line, "About last night." James opened it and read, "James, I know last night was awful, and I'm sorry it happened the way it did. Kellen was drunk and out of line, but we need to discuss this like adults. I've made mistakes, but so have you. We've both been unhappy for a long time. Maybe this is our chance to figure out what we really want. I'm staying at Monica's for a few days to give us both space to think. We should talk when emotions aren't so high." James printed the email and added it to the growing file on his desk. Then he forwarded it to his lawyer with a note, "For your review." The afternoon brought more research. James dove into Georgia divorce law, community property statutes, and adultery provisions. He'd never been one to leave things to chance, and he wasn't starting now. By evening, he had a clear picture of his situation. The house was his. The business was protected by the partnership structure he and Rick had set up years ago. The joint accounts could be frozen pending litigation. And Kellen Bishop had enough skeletons in his closet to bury him twice over. Josh showed up around 7 with takeout from their favorite barbecue place. "You look better," she said, studying the bandage on his head. "I feel better." "Good, because I have some information you're going to want to hear." She set down the food and pulled out her phone. "I made some calls. Asked around about your boy Kellen. And he's got debts all over town. Owes money to half the club owners in Atlanta. Word is he's been promising people connections to your wife's fashion world to get gigs." James opened the barbecue containers, considering this information. "There's more," Joss continued. "Remember Tommy Valdez? Used to bartend for me." "Yeah. He works security at the Ritz downtown now. Says he's seen Kellen and Amelia there twice a week for the past 2 months. Always the same routine, separate entrances. Meet at the bar, go upstairs together. The Ritz is expensive. $500 a night for their cheapest room." Joss pulled up bank records on her phone. "Tommy says they always pay cash, and Amelia's the one who hands over the money." James absorbed this information while they ate. The barbecue was good, but he barely tasted it. His mind was working through implications, calculating damages, planning next steps. "How much do you think she spent on him?" Joss asked. "I'll know tomorrow. I'm meeting with the accountant." "And then?" James looked up from his food. "Then I take everything." The fallout began almost immediately. James watched it unfold from his office, tracking the social media posts and industry gossip that rippled through Atlanta's creative community. The first casualty was Amelia's reputation. The attack at the gallery had been witnessed by too many people, and the story grew in the telling. By Monday morning, everyone knew that Amelia Royce had been cheating on her husband with a DJ who had a criminal record, and that the DJ had attacked James with a bottle when confronted. Sympathy fell largely on James's side. He was known in their circles as quiet but fair, a successful businessman who'd never caused drama. Amelia, despite her beauty and charm, had always been seen as slightly self-absorbed, someone who needed to be the center of attention. That James's phone buzzed with supportive messages. "So sorry to hear what happened. If you need anything, Sarah M. Can't believe that asshole attacked you. Hope you're pressing charges. David K. Thinking of you, brother. Let me know if you want to grab a drink." Marcus W. Amelia's messages told a different story. James had been forwarded screenshots by mutual friends. This is all being blown out of proportion. James wasn't innocent in any of this. People don't know the whole story. Our marriage has been over for months. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. Kellen made a mistake, but he's not a bad person. But the damage was done. Amelia's employer, a high-end fashion PR firm, put her on administrative leave pending review of recent events that may impact our brand image. 3 of her biggest clients canceled their contracts, Unwilling to be associated with the scandal, Kellen fared even worse. Word of his criminal record spread through the DJ community, and club owners who'd been willing to overlook his past were now seeing him as a liability. His regular gigs dried up within days. James watched it all from a distance, feeling neither satisfaction nor sympathy. This was simply cause and effect, the natural consequences of choices made and bridges burned. On Wednesday morning, Rick brought him coffee and the background check results. "This guy's a real piece of work," Rick said, dropping a thick. The file painted a picture of a man who'd spent his adult life skirting the edges of legality. Multiple arrests for bar fights, drug possession, and theft. 3 restraining orders from ex-girlfriends. A pattern of borrowing money he never repaid and burning through relationships when they stopped being useful. "Look at page 12, Rick said. James flipped through and found a police report from 2 years ago. Kellen had been arrested for threatening his ex-girlfriend after she tried to break up with him. The charges were dropped when she refused to testify, but the report included disturbing details about his behavior. "Guy's got serious anger issues," Rick said. "The assault on you wasn't a one-time thing." James made notes in the margins of the report. All of this would be useful in the civil case, painting Kellen as a dangerous individual with a pattern of violence. His lawyer called that afternoon with an update on the criminal charges. "Bishop's been arraigned," David Chin said. "Assault with a deadly weapon, just like we expected." His lawyer's pushing for a plea deal. "What kind of deal?" 6 months jail time, 2 years probation, anger management classes. Standard stuff for a first-time violent offense. It's not his first time, not technically, but his previous convictions were all misdemeanors. This is his first felony assault charge. James considered this. What if he doesn't take the deal? Then we go to trial. With 50 witnesses and video from the gallery security cameras, it's an easy conviction. He's looking at 2 to 5 years. And the civil case, that's where it gets interesting. I've been reviewing his assets, and you're right, he doesn't have any. Everything's in your wife's name. Can we go after those assets? We could try. If we can prove she was knowingly financing his lifestyle while he was threatening and ultimately attacking you, we might have a case for conspiracy or aiding and abetting. James smiled for the first time in days. Draft the paperwork. The civil lawsuit hit like a nuclear bomb on a quiet Thursday morning. James had instructed his lawyer to file all the paperwork simultaneously and serve everyone at the same time. Maximum impact, minimum warning. The lawsuit named both Kellen and Amelia as defendants, alleging assault, conspiracy to commit fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and civil battery. The damages sought were substantial. $500,000 in compensatory damages, $1 million in punitive damages, plus attorneys' fees and court costs. But the real weapon was buried in the financial discovery section. James's lawyers had traced every transaction between Amelia and Kellen over the past 6 months, documenting over $75,000 in transfers from their joint accounts to support his lifestyle. The hotel receipts alone were devastating twice-weekly stays at expensive hotels, always paid for with cash that could be traced back to withdrawals from James and Amelia's joint accounts. The pattern painted a clear picture of deliberate deception and financial infidelity. Amelia's phone call came within an hour of being served. "What the hell is this?" she screamed before James even said hello. "Legal documents. $1.5 million? Are you insane?" The number seemed appropriate. "James, this is ridiculous. We can settle this without lawyers and lawsuits. We could have settled it without affairs and assault too. That's not fair. You know our marriage was in trouble long before Kellen came along." James looked out his office window at the construction site across the street. Workers were laying foundation, building something that would last. "You stole $75,000 from our joint accounts. I didn't steal anything. It's my money too, to spend on hotel rooms with your boyfriend." Silence on the other end of the line. "James," Amelia's voice went soft, pleading. "This doesn't have to be ugly. We can work something out. Divide things fairly, move on with our lives. You should have thought about that before you decided to celebrate our anniversary by introducing me to the man you've been fucking." The crude language hit her like a slap. In 8 years of marriage, James had never spoken to her that way. "I never meant for you to get hurt." "Yes, you did. You wanted me to know? Both of you. That whole party was designed to humiliate me. That's not true. Then why didn't you come to the hospital? Another silence. I was scared, she whispered. Of what? Of you. Of what you might do. James almost laughed. What I might do? I'm not the one with a criminal boyfriend who attacks people with bottles. Kellen was drunk. He didn't mean. Stop. James's voice cut through her excuse. I don't want to hear his name again. Ever. James, please. We can fix this. No, we can't. And even if we could, I wouldn't want to. He hung up and turned off his phone. Outside, the construction workers continued laying foundation, building something solid that would stand for decades. The legal consequences came swift and brutal. Within 24 hours, both Amelia and Kellen's bank accounts were frozen pending the outcome of the lawsuit. Credit cards were suspended. The apartment lease and car registration in Amelia's name became liabilities she couldn't afford to maintain. That Kellen's response was predictably explosive. He showed up at James's office that evening, pounding on the locked doors and shouting threats until security called the police. The incident was captured on the building's security cameras, providing more evidence for the civil case. You can't destroy my life over some bullshit lawsuit. Kellen screamed as the police put him in handcuffs. James watched from his office window as they loaded Kellen into the patrol car. The man who'd seemed so confident and dangerous at the gallery now looked small and desperate, his carefully constructed image crumbling under the weight of consequences. The arrest violated Kellen's bail conditions from the assault charge. By morning, he was back in jail, unable to make the increased bond amount. Friday morning brought the final blow. James had spent the week working with his lawyers to execute the most devastating part of his strategy, reclaiming the house. The legal maneuver was complex but ironclad. The property had been purchased before marriage with funds from James's business trust. It had never been retitled in both names, despite Amelia's occasional requests over the years. Under Georgia law, it remained James's separate property, not subject to community property division. But more importantly, James had discovered something even Amelia didn't know. In her eagerness to transfer money to support Kellen's lifestyle, she'd been using their joint checking account to make mortgage payments on the house. By law, this constituted an unauthorized use of his separate property assets. The eviction notice was served at noon by a sheriff's deputy, just as Amelia was returning from another meeting with her lawyer. James watched from his office across town as she called him, her voice shaking with rage and panic. You can't evict me from my own house. It's not your house. It never was. We've lived there for 8 years. You've lived there as my guest. Now you're not welcome anymore. This is insane, James. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know. Maybe Kellen's place. Kellen's in jail, thanks to you. Kellen's in jail, thanks to Kellen. Actions have consequences. I need time to find somewhere to stay. James looked at his watch. You have until 6 p.m. After that, you're trespassing. 6 hours? That's impossible. Then you better start packing. The house felt different when James returned that evening. Amelia's belongings were gone: clothes, photos, personal items, all hastily stuffed into suitcases and boxes. She'd left behind the furniture, the art they'd chosen together, the life they'd built over 8 years. But she'd also left behind something else: a letter on the kitchen counter, her handwriting shaky with emotion. James, I know you hate me right now, and maybe you have every right to. I made terrible choices and hurt you in ways I never meant to. But this isn't you. The man I married would never be this cruel, this vindictive. You're destroying people's lives over mistakes, over human weakness. I hope someday you can forgive me, and I hope someday you can forgive yourself for what you're becoming. Amelia. James read the letter twice, then crumpled it and threw it in the trash. He poured himself a whiskey and stood in his empty house, listening to the silence. For the first time in months, he felt peace. 3 weeks later, James received an invitation that made him smile for the second time since the gallery incident. Heavy cardstock, elegant font, gold embossing. Amelia had always had good taste in stationery. Join us for a rebirth brunch celebrating new beginnings and Fresh Start Sunday, March 15th, 11 a.m., the Westmore Estate. Below the formal text, in Amelia's handwriting. Time to move forward with grace and dignity. James knew the Westmore Estate, a trendy event space in Buckhead that rented for $3,000 a day. The guest list would be their mutual friends, influencers from Amelia's fashion world, anyone whose opinion mattered in Atlanta's social scene. The message was clear. Amelia was trying to control the narrative, to position herself as the victim who was rising above her circumstances with dignity and class. James RSVP'd that he would attend. Sunday morning arrived crisp and clear, the kind of spring day that made Atlanta feel like paradise. James dressed carefully, his best suit, Italian leather shoes, silk tie. He wanted to look like exactly what he was, a successful man who'd weathered a storm and come out stronger. The Westmore Estate was already buzzing when he arrived at 11:15. Valet parking, mimosas on silver trays, servers in white jackets moving through the crowd with canapes. Amelia had spared no expense. She stood at the center of the main room, radiant in a flowing white dress that made her look like she was floating. Her hair was styled in soft waves, her makeup perfect despite the circumstances. She was holding court with a group of women James recognized from various charity events and gallery openings. Kellen stood beside her, looking uncomfortable in an ill-fitting suit. He'd made bail 2 days ago, thanks to a loan from Amelia's mother, but the 3 weeks in jail had taken their toll. He was thinner, pale, with dark circles under his eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. The room went quiet when James walked in. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as heads turned to stare. He smiled politely and nodded to people he recognized, acting as if his presence was the most natural thing in the world. James! Monica Peterson, one of Amelia's closest friends, approached with a nervous smile. I didn't expect to see you here. Amelia invited me. How could I miss her rebirth? Monica's smile faltered. Well, it's good that you're both being mature about everything. I'm very mature. James accepted a mimosa from a passing server and made his way through the crowd. People watched him with fascination and fear, like he was an unexploded bomb that might go off at any moment. He found Joss near the bar, looking uncomfortable in a dress she'd clearly borrowed for the occasion. What the hell are you doing here? She whispered. Supporting my wife's new beginning. James, this is a bad idea. No, this is a perfect idea. Before Joss could argue, Amelia's voice rang out across the room. Everyone, if I could have your attention for just a moment. The crowd turned toward her, drinks raised, faces expectant. She looked radiant, confident, every inch the woman who'd charmed Atlanta's social scene for the better part of a decade. I want to thank you all for being here today, she began, her voice warm and gracious. The past few weeks have been difficult, as many of you know, but they've also been enlightening. Murmurs of support from the crowd. I've learned that sometimes we have to go through darkness to find light. Sometimes we have to lose ourselves to discover who we really are. More murmurs, heads nodding in approval. I've also learned who my real friends are. The people who stand by you when things get ugly, who believe in your capacity for growth and change. She paused, her eyes finding James across the room. And I've learned that forgiveness isn't just something we give to others. It's something we give to ourselves. The crowd was eating it up. James could see them buying the narrative of Amelia as the wounded but resilient woman, rising above betrayal and bitterness to embrace a better future. So today isn't about looking back. It's about moving forward with grace, with dignity, and with love. She raised her mimosa glass. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, the crowd echoed, raising their glasses. James didn't raise his glass. He simply smiled and began walking toward the center of the room. The crowd parted before him like water, sensing something about to happen. Conversations died as he approached Amelia and Kellen. Lovely speech, he said when he reached them, that Amelia's confidence flickered for just a moment. James, I'm glad you came. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. Kellen shifted uncomfortably beside her, his hand going instinctively to his jacket pocket, a nervous habit James hadn't noticed. It takes courage to start over, James continued, his voice carrying clearly through the silent room. To admit your mistakes and try to build something better. Yes, Amelia said carefully. It does. Of course, it helps when you have somewhere to start over. James reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. What's that? Amelia asked. Legal documents. He held up the envelope so everyone could see it. Court orders, actually. The silence in the room became absolute. You see, there's been a development in our civil case. James opened the envelope and pulled out the papers. The judge ruled on our motion for emergency asset preservation. Amelia's face went white. Turns out, using marital assets to finance an extramarital affair constitutes fraud under Georgia law, especially when those assets are used to support someone who then commits assault. James, don't do this here, Amelia whispered. Do what? Share good news with friends. He smiled at the watching crowd. The court has ordered full restitution of all misappropriated funds, plus penalties and interest. The total comes to $112,437. Gasped from the crowd. Kellen took a step back. But here's the interesting part, James continued. Since neither defendant has sufficient liquid assets to satisfy the judgment, the court has authorized seizure of all jointly held property. He pulled out another document. This includes the lease on Mr. Bishop's apartment, which is in Amelia's name, and the BMW he drives, also registered to Amelia. And unfortunately, this event space. What? Amelia's voice cracked. The Westmore estate, rented using a credit card that's been frozen by court order. Which means, James looked at his watch. The rental agreement is now in default. As if on cue, the main doors opened and two sheriff's deputies walked in, followed by a man in a business suit carrying an official-looking clipboard. Ladies and gentlemen, the man announced, I'm sorry to interrupt your event, but this facility is now under court-ordered seizure. I need everyone to exit the premises immediately. The room erupted in chaos. Guests looked around in confusion, some laughing nervously, others heading for the exits. Servers stopped mid-service, unsure what to do. This can't be happening, Amelia said, staring at the deputies. Oh, but it is. James folded the documents and put them back in the envelope. You wanted a rebirth, Amelia. Congratulations. You're about to be reborn with absolutely nothing. Kellen stepped forward, his face red with rage. You son of a bitch. You planned this. I planned to serve legal papers. You planned to throw a party you couldn't afford. James's smile never wavered. Which one of us showed better judgment? I'll kill you, Kellen snarled, moving closer. Mr. Bishop, one of the deputies stepped forward. I'd be very careful about making threats. You're already facing assault charges. Kellen stopped, but his hands were clenched into fists. Actually, James said, there's one more thing. He pulled out his phone and showed the screen to the room. I've been recording this conversation. Mr. Bishop just threatened to kill me in front of 50 witnesses and 2 police officers. He looked at the deputies. That's a felony, isn't it? Yes, sir, the deputy said, already moving toward Kellen. Terroristic threats. No, wait. Kellen started to back away. Kellen Bishop, you're under arrest. The cuffs clicked around Kellen's wrists as the crowd watched in stunned silence. Some people were filming with their phones now, capturing every moment of the spectacular collapse. This is insane, Amelia screamed. You're destroying people's lives over money. No, James said calmly. I'm collecting what's owed to me. There's a difference. The deputies led Kellen toward the exit. He turned back at the last moment, his face twisted with rage and desperation. This isn't over, he shouted. Yes, James said. It is. The room cleared quickly after that. Guests filed out in small groups, whispering among themselves, phones already buzzing with calls and texts. The story would be all over social media within an hour. Soon only James, Amelia, and a few stragglers remained in the elegant space that had been transformed from celebration to crime scene in the span of 10 minutes. Amelia stood alone in the center of the room, still wearing her white dress, looking lost and broken. Are you happy now? She asked. James considered the question seriously. Yes, he said. I think I am. Scene 2. Amelia's descent. The weeks that followed were swift and brutal. James watched Amelia's life unravel with the same methodical attention he brought to his construction projects. Every foundation had its load-bearing points, and once those were compromised, the collapse was inevitable. She tried to find another apartment, but the frozen bank accounts and ruined credit made it impossible. The few friends who might have helped were scared off by the legal drama and social media attention. She ended up staying in a series of cheap motels, the kind of places she'd once driven past without seeing. Her job was officially terminated after the brunch incident went viral. The video footage of Kellen's arrest, combined with the court documents James had made public, painted a picture of someone whose personal life had become too messy for a high-end PR firm to tolerate. The phone call started 3 days after the brunch. "James, please. I know you're angry, but this has gone far enough." He listened to the voicemail, but didn't respond. "I can't afford a lawyer anymore. My accounts are frozen. I can't work. I can't even rent an apartment. What do you want from me?" "Delete. I get it, okay? You won. You destroyed my life. You got your revenge. But I'm still your wife. Doesn't that mean anything?" "Delete." The emails were longer, more desperate. "James, I know I hurt you, and I know I deserve consequences for my actions. But what you're doing now is beyond punishment. It's cruelty. I'm living in a motel room that costs $40 a night, and I can barely afford to eat. My mother won't return my calls because she's ashamed of the scandal. My friends act like I have a contagious disease. You've taken everything. My home, my job, my reputation, my future. What more do you want? What would it take for you to show mercy?" James printed the email and added it to his file. His lawyer had advised him to keep all communications as evidence of her emotional state, potentially useful in the final divorce proceedings. 2 weeks later, she tried a different approach. "I've been thinking about what you said that night at the gallery. About how I never appreciated what we had, how I took you for granted. You were right. I did take you for granted. I thought you would always be there, always be reliable, always be safe. I mistook your stability for weakness, your loyalty for passivity. I realize now that I never understood who you really were. The man who destroyed my life in 3 weeks is not weak or passive. He's calculated, intelligent, and absolutely ruthless when crossed. I should have been grateful to be married to someone so capable instead of looking elsewhere for excitement. I know it's too late now, but I wanted you to know that I finally understand." James read this email twice before deleting it. The insight was accurate but irrelevant. Understanding your mistakes didn't undo them. Kellen fared even worse. The terroristic threats charge, combined with his previous assault conviction, earned him 18 months in state prison. His DJ career was over, his reputation destroyed, his future prospects limited to whatever work an ex-con with anger management issues could find. James felt neither satisfaction nor pity watching their downfall. It was simply the natural order of things, actions, and consequences, choices, and their inevitable results. Scene 3. The rise of James Royce. While Amelia's world collapsed, James's expanded. The scandal that had destroyed her reputation had enhanced his. Atlanta's business community respected a man who could be pushed so far and then push back with such devastating effectiveness. New clients sought him out, drawn by his reputation for quiet competence and absolute follow-through. If James Royce said something would be done, it got done. If he made a promise, he kept it. If he made a threat, he meant it. Within 6 months, his construction company had expanded into 2 new markets, Birmingham and Nashville. Rick officially became a full partner, and they hired 12 new employees to handle the increased demand. Joss became their chief financial officer, bringing her street-smart understanding of people and her family's talent for seeing through bullshit. She moved the Brass Monkey to a larger location in Virginia Highland and opened a second bar in Decatur. "You know what's funny?" she said one evening as they reviewed quarterly reports in James's home office. "What's that? Amelia always said you were too cold, too controlled. But look what happened when you finally let yourself feel something." James looked up from the financial statements. "What did I feel? Anger. Real, honest anger. The kind that burns everything down. Is that what this was? Anger?" Joss studied his face. "What else would you call it?" James thought about the question. He'd spent months analyzing his own motivations, trying to understand the man who'd systematically destroyed 2 lives with such methodical precision. "Justice," he said finally. "Same thing sometimes." The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in October. Amelia didn't contest anything she couldn't afford to. James kept the house, the business, the investments, and all shared assets. Amelia walked away with nothing but the clothes she'd managed to pack before the eviction. He never saw her again after the courthouse. She moved back to her hometown in North Carolina, according to mutual friends. Got a job at a small marketing firm, lived in a studio apartment, kept a low profile. The woman who'd once been the center of Atlanta's social scene had simply vanished. James built a lake house that fall, 2 hours north of Atlanta in the mountains. Modern design, clean lines, walls of glass that looked out over still water. He furnished it simply comfortable furniture, good books, a sound system for the jazz he'd always preferred. He spent weekends there alone, reading and thinking and watching the seasons change. Not lonely solitude and loneliness were different things. He learned the difference during his marriage. 1 year after the gallery incident, James stood in the bathroom of his lake house, getting ready for another day. The scar above his left ear was barely visible now, just a thin white line that disappeared into his hairline. But he could feel it when he ran his fingers through his hair, a permanent reminder of the night his life changed. In the mirror, he looked older but not aged. The stress lines around his eyes had faded, replaced by something calmer. He'd lost weight, gained muscle from weekend hikes, and swimming in the lake. At 40, he was in better shape than he'd been at 30. His phone showed 17 unread messages, but none were urgent. His assistant would handle the day-to-day business while he spent another long weekend at the lake. The company ran itself now, a well-oiled machine that generated wealth and reputation with minimal input from him. On the kitchen counter, next to his coffee maker, sat an envelope that had arrived the day before. His name written in familiar handwriting, postmarked from North Carolina. He'd opened it that morning, read the first line, then fed the rest to the fireplace without reading further. James, I know I have no right to contact you, but I needed you to know. Whatever she needed him to know, he didn't need to hear. That chapter of his life was closed, the book finished and shelved. He poured coffee and walked out onto the deck. The lake stretched out before him, mirror smooth in the morning calm. Somewhere across the water, a loon called to its mate. James smiled, and for the first time in years, it was a smile of pure contentment. Not satisfaction at destroying his enemies, not pleasure at accumulating wealth or respect, just quiet happiness at being exactly where he was, exactly who he was. He'd learned something important in the past year. Not all scars were ugly. Some marked the places where you'd been broken and healed stronger. Some reminded you of lessons learned, prices paid, wisdom earned. Some scars were beautiful. The loon called again across the water, and James Royce smiled as the sun rose on another perfect day. Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin.